that's a massive lesson that we all learn in this industry, is that there isn't a line between work and social. It really does sort of cross over.
Possible? Does PR give you that sort of, can it be that magic bullet where you only spend 1 but you get 15 back?
And I got an out of office call from the PR team asking me to take it down. And I said I would, but only if I could speak to a decision maker at the group so that they understood my perspective. I don't know if it changed, but for me, that felt like there was something positive coming from that. And I feel like what the industry was steering away from then, the industry is now embracing, because it is actually all about allowing the community to live and breathe in those spaces.
Okay, a very warm welcome to the Hotel Growth Podcast. I'm the host, Adam Hamadache, and I'm delighted to have Hamish Kilburn with us today. So Hamish is a former editor of a hotel publication. He's a journalist. He was the podcast presenter of the Marriott Bonvoy podcast, and he's also the owner of PR agency Kilburn Communications. My conversation with Hamish was really enlightening, and I think at a time where hotels are looking for ways in which they can make their budgets go further, PR is a really interesting area to explore if you've not done so. We talk about how you can leverage design and stories to really give you the extra exposure to your market. But we also, towards the end of our conversation, talk about sustainability. And everyone's trying to be more sustainable. That's obvious, but sometimes it's more authentic than perhaps at other times, and how you can leverage PR to be able to really make your sustainability practices go further. So let's get straight into the conversation. I think you're going to find it really, really enjoyable and informative. So let's jump straight in. So Hamish, great to have you on. How are you today?
Hi Adam. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm really good. It feels like we're in a fresh new start this year, so yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, indeed. Well, we've come dressed exactly the same, unintentionally. For those
Great minds think alike, hey?
For those that are watching the video to this, appreciate the audio listeners.
I think that's because, like, when you think about it, looking outside, it's grey, it's a bit miserable. Yeah. January, it's like kind of like that weather of, you just want to feel cozy. And whenever I record a podcast, that's what I want to feel. Is just like in your little nook,
Yeah. Well, hopefully we can provide some cozy and enlightening conversations today. We'll be obviously talking a lot about PR. That's obviously your area of expertise. But maybe before we get started, could you give us a bit of a sort of background about your experience in the hotel industry?
How long have you got? I feel like my time in the industry up to now has been pretty short and sweet, to be honest. I've got 10 years experience being in hotel design, and that's kind of where my speciality lies. I started off being the features editor of a new magazine that was launching at the time to the industry, a glossy magazine, one of those coffee table reads, and that was really fascinating. I was the features editor, so it was all about trying to take really interesting stories and carve out new narratives for the magazine and really establish what that brand was. And then I went and detoured a little bit. I went to work for the Lad Bible. Everyone who knows me knows that I'm such a lad. I
did not know this about it.
It was, but do you know what? I loved my time at the Lad Bible because I was able to work for a title that was, a market leader. We had 1 million views or users per day to the website, which was insane. And I mean, so many things I had to navigate, including trolls, because all of our articles were linked to our personal social media accounts. So you had to deal with that, but also just understanding how a story lands and then how it gets like teased on social, and then the audience reach just blows up. So that was really interesting. And then I went to work in PR and marketing in an agency called Sponge Marketing, where I met Jane Hanson, who was my boss at the time, and I learned so much from her. So the agency was really well known in sports PR specifically, and then we had a few travel clients. So we looked after Nevis in the Caribbean, which was insane. So this island, there's no building that's allowed to be taller than a palm tree. That's literally one of the regulations. So it's really the way the Caribbean used to be, and then really engaging with luxury and travel press for them to really experience that and see for themselves and experience for themselves. It's not just a press release that says it. The experience is incredible, was amazing. And then from that, we then started to work with the Barbados Tourism Board in their year of sport. So we were basically assigned onto the account to launch a beach and wellness festival and a cycling festival as well, and then engage with lifestyle and luxury press. So that was amazing. And then at that time, I don't know if I think everyone can agree in this industry that people don't really change, and the people that I knew from when I was at the magazine as features editor really were still friends. And I think that's a massive lesson that we all learn in this industry, is that there isn't a line between work and social. It really does sort of cross over. So I kept in touch with all of my contacts really because they were friends. And then I realized that I had the little black book, if you like, to go for the editor of another magazine, and went to work there. And 6 years later, here I am now, established in my own company, Kilburn Communications. So I've been able to take what I learned in PR, what I learned in editorial, and I really think we're at a time now where the lines are being blurred between editorial and PR anyway. I think it's less about being an editor or a PR specialist and more just understanding the media and what the audience wants. Sorry, that was a really long-winded way of saying what I do.
No, I think it's really interesting actually, because you've touched on quite a key issue here, which is, is there an opportunity? Do you have to be so siloed as to be a sort of a PR specialist or a journalist, or ultimately, I think there'll be a lot of hoteliers listening to this, thinking, how do we engage with press, and how do we get more coverage? And I think it's what you're saying, if I'm not mistaken, is that you can actually, those areas, those kind of two, what used to be quite distinct areas, are now kind of merging. And actually, it's all about just providing that. It's all about the story, the narrative. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And there is a science to it, and we do work on strategies, but it's also not rocket science. I think you can get really lost in your head on how to communicate something. And for me, I mean, I've experienced a few times in my career being able to communicate, really niche markets to a consumer audience. And at the end of the day, we are, when you're speaking to, people directly in the industry, they are consumers as well. So everyone's in the same boat. And I feel like just communicating a narrative is what should really be focused on. I did 2 series of being the podcast host for Marriott Bonvoy, Travel by Design. And that was really exciting because I was able to interview the leading designers on projects and really understand the design narratives behind those projects, which, to be honest, I've been doing for the last 10 years anyway within this industry. But the real challenge there was how to communicate those nuances to an audience that doesn't necessarily understand design but is enthusiastic about it. And I feel like there's a real lesson there for the hospitality industry, because people have woken up. I mean, I hate to sort of mention the pandemic too early on in the podcast, but people have woken up since the pandemic, and people are so much more, and it was happening anyway, there was less focus in luxury on buying a product and more focus on buying an experience. And that I think is trickling down to other sectors as well. So all of a sudden there's curiosity. Well, hospitality has the tools to be able to feed that curiosity. Now we need to amplify that's happening in the right way, and by doing that you really help carve out what your brand and what your niche and what your identity is as well. So it's just about living and breathing it, I guess. Okay, that I mean, that's an interesting approach. Let's talk about challenges at the moment. We're recording this at in January 2025. Right now, in April, we know that obviously the tax rules are changing, and hospitality businesses, particularly not just hospitality, but basically costs are going up significantly in April. We already know energy costs are increasing. What do you feel, from your particular perspective, are the biggest challenges right now for the industry? I think the biggest challenge is with costs going up, and is to be able to elevate your experience while also keeping the bottom line in a healthy place. And that is a real challenge. And unfortunately, that does mean that you need to decide where you're going to spend the budget and be confident in that decision, knowing that there's a return of investment at the end of it. But then there's another further challenge to that, because all of these experiences have to land feeling quite authentic and not kind of geared up to create revenue. I don't know what the solution is. I guess these one thing I've seen in, I hate the word trends, but in a trend, I guess, over the last few years, or a movement, is really blurring the boundaries between spaces in hotels. And then what that does is that allows for, opportunities for revenue to creep in, because, you can have your coffee from anywhere. It doesn't have to just be in the restaurant or the lounge. It could be, it really does feel like a home from home. And I think by making those spaces feel as comfortable as possible, you're then going to, encourage return of people checking in and out of the hotel and calling it their own. I think there's a huge lesson there, really, in terms of understanding that these hotels need to be, hotels need to be owned by the community around them and embraced by the community in order for them to then excel in other ways. And actually, a brand that's done that so well and has had a lot of attention on them recently is the Pig. Robin and Judy have done such a fabulous job in just taking this passion project and expanding it in the right way at the right pace, so that these places feel really owned by their community.
Let me just. I'll circle back to community in a minute, because I think there's something really interesting in that. But you talked just a minute ago about innovating the operations around your business. So being able to order a coffee, in various different places throughout the business. Do you feel that is sort of, for want of a better word, PRable? Do you feel that by having sort of being slightly bit more innovative in the way that you deliver your experience to customers, can you take those sort of ideas and stories and sell those in to get extra exposure?
I think you need to I think it's a good question, because being able to order your coffee from anywhere isn't a PRable story. But what could be is these activations that hotels include. And I love when an idea lands and it isn't. So for example, I was speaking to a hotel group late last year, and it was a really weird experience, because I was catching up with this general manager who's a friend of mine. I was doing a panel discussion for another client, and in between the rehearsal and go time, I had like maybe 45 minutes. So I went and caught up with this general manager, and we were just talking and just throwing ideas around, as we always do. And then all of a sudden, this like talk series came to our heads of what a great way to be able to lock in the community around their hotels. And it was more just for that particular property. But then what we realized was actually it lands quite nicely among all of the different territories. And also when you're then opening a new hotel, it then becomes a great way to engage with the community. So I think it's really hard. I mean, I host a lot of panel discussions, as you know. And as you do as well, Adam, and I don't know if you find this, but if you ever look around the audience, you see people like frantically scribbling notes of everything that everyone said. And that's although obviously it's good to be engaged, it's so the wrong approach, because you need to walk away and establish what's going to work for your hotel. And that's the hard part of this whole situation, is you have to find something new or do something better. There's no point just jumping on the bandwagon, although obviously on social media trends, it's, for algorithm's sake, that's fine. But when it comes to actually the experience that consumers are getting, being able to really own something that's your own, and actually, as a result, give that person checking into your hotel something truly unique. Normally, I would say that's around the location. Is that is the magic, I would say.
I think that's a really interesting point, because I think you see it happen so often where a genuinely innovative brand and product comes to market, and they've done amazingly well. If we continue with the pig as a wonderful example, that they that the sort of the kitchen garden concept had been done before, but they did it in such a that they positioned themselves initially as a restaurant with rooms, and it's all about the food and the local produce and all those wonderful things. And I think what we've seen is that lots of hotels have sort of jumped on that bandwagon, but because they've tried to perhaps copy, or they've seen it done well with the pig, they've tried to apply it, and it's not been quite as effective because they didn't have the necessary bits in place. I think what I'm taking from what you're saying is really kind of being discerning about what actually makes us truly unique, rather than this worked for so and so, let's try that ourselves. Is that what you're sort of
It is. And also it's really hard out there in the independent hotel market, because you've got these massive hotel groups that are opening new brands left, right and centre, and on the outside looking in, they feel like independent brands, and they're not. But they've got the backing of these huge marketing resources and huge, collective tools that help them generate the revenue that they're able to generate, which is, why it's safe for investors. But I cannot say enough, and to be honest with you, Emma Cripwell, who does the PR for the pig, has done such a blinding job, but with such an amazing concept to play with. Robin and Judy, they I cannot emphasize enough how much they've done for the hospitality market, as an example of going against the grain, and as you said, taking a concept that everyone, and obviously food and beverage is going to be that concept because it's so subjective, and there's so many areas that you can play with and be kind of quirky and also relate it back to the locale. And I think the other untapped market at the moment is design. There's so many now that I see new materials every day being played with and explored. And in a trade show a few years ago, there was a mycelium bar, so it was designed out of a mushroom fungus, and it's just like these things are really cool, and these things are really, obviously that's not going to work in every sort of location, but playing with design the way that chefs play with recipes, I just think there's really something in that.
Yeah, and so I suppose if you are a hotelier that is, we're looking to expand or improve the renovate. A lot of renovations happen in the industry in January, obviously. I think what I'm hearing is that you should be really thinking about it holistically, and thinking, rather than, okay, we'll put all of this money into these new rooms, we've kitted out the hotel in a beautiful way. Okay, now let's think about marketing and perhaps maybe getting some exposure. I think what you're seemingly suggesting is bringing it all into one. So thinking about, okay, well, maybe if we go down that design, we could really leverage that through some great press coverage because it's very unique and different. Is that
no, you're right, and I'm a bit of a hotel design geek, I guess, and I never thought I would be, but I also entered this market as featured editor of that magazine with absolutely no experience whatsoever in design, and the only way that you learn is by asking questions and reading articles and ask the stupid questions, because they're not, at the end of the day. What I really loved about doing the podcast for Marriott was that every episode we took a different hotel and a different project, and we spoke to the designer behind the bones of that project to really dissect the whole narrative and the inspiration as well. And it's amazing the approach and the kind of the journey the designers go on as well. There's one which is a St. Regis in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. And the designer, Tatiana Shevelova, I remember speaking to her about what her inspiration was in the bathrooms, because they're quite unique in their sort of identity and the aesthetics, but also the feel as well. And then she started talking to me about this story of her visiting the local cenotes and the kind of cold water pools around that kind of area of Mexico, and the transformative experience that gave her. And then that kind of injected this passion of hers to inject that same feeling in the bathrooms. And to be honest, that's not one example. There are so many examples. There's another hotel in in New York, the W Union Square, and that's designed by David Rockwell. And I was able to speak to David on this project, and what I loved about it was the fact that he originally designed that hotel 20 years ago. So being able to go back 20 years and interview him to be able to understand, okay, well, how was the lobby design changed from then to now? And you look at it and it's changed drastically. For example, they've completely repositioned the stairs and created this runner from the stairs that kind of flows into the lobby, so it really blurs the lines between the two spaces. And all of a sudden, whereas they were like traditional lobby desks 20 years ago, now it's got this free flow to it. And I feel like what the industry was steering away from then, the industry is now embracing, because it is actually all about allowing the community to live and breathe in those spaces. And okay, they're hotel groups, and that's fine, that's Marriott, but you can always take what hotel groups are doing and then understand, well, what can they not do? And what they can't do is they can't really go as far as perhaps independent hotels can, in terms of like really injecting the identity of that particular building or that particular property, and adding that on through all the touch points in hospitality as well. All of a sudden you've got this really unique proposition. But I would say there's no point just throwing things at the wall. You really have to think about what your brand is.
Yeah. Okay. So then when it comes then to, once you've got your product, you've got your brand, and you're really wanting to really get some more exposure, what advice would you offer to hotels that just feel that they're not getting enough exposure, that they're just not known enough? What can they do?
Before looking at hiring a PR agency or bringing someone in to do the PR, there's a lot that can be done on your own now in terms of social media. And they call this theory the democratization of everything, which is essentially that anyone, anywhere can now have a platform. No longer are we relying on reading the headlines to get our news. We've got Twitter, we've got all of this citizen journalism happening. And then we've also got these really lovely narratives that play out with brands online. And obviously you have to really balance the line between what's cliche and what's like engaging and informative. But if you can understand and identify what your unique selling points are as a property and as an experience, try to carve those out in terms of what your social media narrative is. And don't be afraid of it either, because the beauty of social media is there's so much noise out there. It can get, it gets lost in it's short, hard hitting, engaging media assets. So, reels are such a good way to get engagement on social media, and also engagement among people who are interested in your property, and then start understanding what the narratives are before thinking about how that could potentially be of interest to, for example, the press. But I don't think the press are the only routes to market, if you like, or routes to amplification. And to be honest with you, there's no point getting a really nice article in a magazine if on the outside of it you're not then working hard to promote your brand to your audience, because that's the end goal, right? So yes. It's not really an answer, I'm afraid, Adam, but from my side it's just about really understanding what you can be doing to make that as compelling as possible as a narrative on your own platforms.
Sure. Okay. Well, how important a role do you see PR having in 2025? I appreciate you use the phrase democratization of everything, and we all know how impactful some of the social media channels can be, or indeed, conversely, how difficult it can be to really grow an audience if you feel like you're spending a lot of time, money, and energy into your posts, but just don't feel like you're getting the traction. How important do you feel PR is going into?
Massively. I mean, when I was working at Sponge Marketing, when I initially went into PR, there was this commissioning editor, and I remember he was quite a character, he probably still is actually, and he said, Hamish, journalists are overworked, underpaid, and always looking for solutions. And it is kind of true. I mean, I'm not going to sort of announce what my salary was, but it's more like to understand that a good... And actually, I feel like my experience in PR to begin with really helped me being an editor, because you're able to rely on the right people, but also when you get a story through, and you can think about, okay, well, how can I, this angle may not be right, but actually there's something in this, and it's an initial introduction to a brand or something that you see, like a little spark that you see could work in a future issue, or a piece you're writing. So yeah, it's massive. But I also see my role now, having worked in the industry in editorial, but also really understand the market in terms of the key players. For our clients, I consider myself a specialist who can help them navigate their business as well as PR as well. I mean, we're not shy to introduce people to people who are going to help, or we're not shy to introduce people that are going to help their businesses grow, whether that be through amplification or whether that be through a business-to-business engagement or an introduction. At the end of the day, it kind of all sits in the same pot, I feel, and I do think the kind of notion of just having a PR agency who's known for getting great headlines, great, that's amazing. But actually, if you're in a niche, which is hospitality or design, there are specific agencies out there who really understand your market and really understand, or will work hard to understand your brand in order to put themselves forward. And I also think what I've noticed over the last few years, obviously from the pandemic, is there's a lot of PR specialists who were working for these big agencies who have now branched off on their own, and quite rightly are doing a fabulous job and got amazing clients. But what you then get from them is you get that person working on the account, not just sort of directing the other members of the team, but there's that passion, but you also know they've got the contacts as well. So it's a really exciting time to be in PR. Obviously it's competitive, but actually I don't think it's as competitive as people think it is. There's this massive WhatsApp account called PRs for travel and design as well now, and it's amazing how many people are willing to help other people. And there's like 700 members in this WhatsApp group. It's insane, and it goes off constantly all the time, and it's just people saying, do you know the contact for this person, do you know this, do you know that? There's so much less of an emphasis now on everyone pretending they know everyone, and there's more openness and transparency in saying, well, I might not, but I can introduce them to someone who can. And actually, I think clients prefer that approach anyway.
I'm just going to briefly interrupt this conversation to inform you about hotelgrowth.co.uk. If you visit that website, you'll be able to enter the National Hotel Growth Survey. By answering a handful of multiple choice questions, all to do around the subject of growing your hotel business, you'll be able to compare your answers with the rest of the wider industry across the UK and across the rest of the world. We've had over 200 hotels take part, and just by answering those questions, takes a few minutes, you'll be able to instantly see how your answers relate to the rest of the industry, and you'll be given straightforward, straight talking advice about what you can do to improve your hotel growth prospects for 2025. So head over to hotelgrowth.co.uk to fill in that survey and get your personalised report now. I just want to pick up on something that I feel very strongly, I completely agree with, that we are seeing, whether it be PR, marketing, any profession really, people that have built up, big and a wide range of experience in big agencies, go off and start their own by themselves, or as a small company, and inevitably what you end up doing is when you buy into these sort of much smaller organisations or people with huge amounts of experience, sometimes you might pay less, sometimes you pay the same, but the level of service and experience that you can get is so profound. And I'll just share this brief story. When we took over, we were doing PPC or sort of biddable ad spend for a large group in the UK, and we won the account from a big PPC agency. I mean, it was one of the biggest wins we'd had to date at that point. And when we were liaising with the agency, we were a bit nervous, like they're these big guys, like, okay, let's make sure that we don't sound silly. And I was shocked that I was speaking to like a 23-year-old, and she, a very pleasant young lady, but she was the lead on the account. And there I'm sat with, all of my senior people working through the detail of the handover. And it just goes to show that, some of these big agencies, you buy into the name, and I think it will probably be, I'm sure it'll be the same with PR,
Yeah,
whereas
massively.
actually you're paying over the odds for junior members of the team.
It's funny though, because I get real imposter syndrome in those environments, and really like I then feel like, oh my god, we won it, oh my god, like what we're gonna do. But then you kind of, and I panic first because I'm like, how are we gonna do this? But then you start understanding that no, these people, you know how to do it, you know how to get that. And that sounds like we're amateurs, but it's really not. I think it's because I see it in you, Adam. I mean, we've known each other for a while, but you wear your heart on your sleeve, and that's the same with myself in terms of like our clients. We really care, and we want to make sure that we're doing the best we can, but it's that passion that drives the account, and it's that passion that's going to get you into those opportunities that potentially would be missed from other people that are just seeing it as, let's just get as much coverage as possible with these titles. It's so much more about understanding what the client needs, and actually I think a massive part in PR and marketing is being able to impart your advice, even if that advice is unpopular with the client at first, to really understand, if they are ever traveling in the wrong direction or direction that isn't, or maybe something they haven't seen, to be able to impart that while also understanding their vision. That's a real balancing act, I feel. But from my experience, I feel like clients really appreciate that.
Without question, and I think that's probably the extra thing as part of this discussion. Junior people don't have the confidence to challenge the clients, and I think that's where the experience comes. I actually don't quite agree with that, and here's why. Let's talk about it. Let's talk a little bit about return on investment, because, and I have to say, I know the basics of PR. There was a PR module on my university course many years ago, but what I've always been intrigued about by PR is that for a relatively modest investment in someone like your company, a PR agency, the level of return on investment can be so disproportionately high to what you're actually putting in when you get that really killer piece of coverage in the right publication. And I think that's an interesting concept right now when budgets are being squeezed everywhere. Whatever budget hotels have, it needs to go further. This year perhaps more than it has any other year. Do you feel that sentiment? Is that possible? Does PR give you that sort of? Can it be that magic bullet where you only spend one but you get 15 back?
Yeah, it can, and I think like the biggest thing that I've learned is that it really isn't just about shooting over a press release and getting that coverage and celebrating it. It's about building really strong relationships with the press, with the journalists, with the editors, to understand what they want next, and be able to provide them with something that is compelling and genuine editorial that they can then run with, or ask questions, or intrigue, insight, or whatever that may be. But that's the hard part of PR is those conversations are happening all the time. It's quite funny because I purchased the agency off my mum. So my mum's got 24 years experience with EK Communications, which is the company that's merging to become Kilburn Communications for obvious reasons. But Mum and I are hilarious together. She's still in the industry and still in the business, and we sit in the same office and we're just like constantly on the phone. I got asked to face the wall the other day because I was too loud, but that genuinely is what the job is. It's constantly talking, constantly engaging, and without being annoying, obviously. Well, I don't know if that's on someone else to decide whether we're annoying or not, but it's about not just having these, and I think the industry can see through it as well. I mean, we can all see through people who just name drop, but people who are willing to actually, and that's why it takes time. That's why it needs an investment. That's why it needs a dedicated person or an agency to be on that account to drive it, because it's not just a case of writing a lovely press release or article or interview up and then sending it off. It's about really understanding what the publication wants.
I guess
that's the hard part as well, Adam, because you then land an amazing piece of coverage in one title, and then for obvious reasons you're not then going to be in that title next month as well. But obviously we have to manage our clients' expectations as well to be able to say, you know, then we'll so we can look and we can steer this way and that way. And what we're finding at the moment is there's limited magazines in the industry as sort of business to business magazines, and an editor, quite rightly, wouldn't want to go with a huge exclusive interview that's a 5-page, 6-page interview if we're seeding exactly the same thing to the press the same month. So it's about really being quite transparent with press as well, and understanding and having a strategy in place. And that comes from a really strong strategy at the end of the day.
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, some of the podcast episodes that I've done to date, the one probably that sticks out most is Ben Harper from the Watergate Bay Hotel, and obviously all of their group. Ben was really fascinatingly shared that, you know, they don't really rely on OTAs for their bookings. They've invested. Obviously, the product is fantastic. Their suite of their portfolio of accommodation is, you know, sort of right up there.
What they've done really well is they've been able to optimize the consumer engagement around their product, and again focusing on social media, focusing on media as well in the consumer market and travel. But they're also, I loved when I can't remember what suites there were, but I was on the editorial desk at the time, and I remember receiving the information about it, and I loved the fact that they went down the design route to sort of pitch that hotel and to promote it, because it actually puts emphasis back on the designers. And I think in this industry we're so good at collaboration just naturally and authentically. Why would we then not champion those people that have helped us make the model what it is? And that's what I think, if you're ever working with an interior designer and you have a PR plan, or you have, you know, plans to amplify that further outside, being able to amplify the design narrative and to allow the designers to get credit on the work they've done, that is just going to help your reach as well, because it showcases that you're collaborating with the right people.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, let's talk about your pet hates when it comes to hotel design. Do you have any? What sort of when?
I do. So obviously, I've been reviewing hotels for a while now, and I've gone to some incredible places. I have to say though, it did get to the point, I think 6 years into my editorship, where I never ever took anything for granted. I loved every trip that I went on, but going to a destination or the most romantic place on earth on your own, and just knowing that it just, at the time, it kind of felt like, okay, this is starting to feel a bit complacent, and that's actually when I decided to sort of try to look at other avenues. So there is that, but by doing that, I've definitely seen the industry in a new light, and being able to go in and really see the design narrative through a lens has been really interesting. My biggest pet peeve though, oh my god, so I was in a hotel last year, and I was actually at an event, and I was hosting a panel discussion the next day, so I just wanted everything sorted the night before. So I wanted to iron my shirt, as you would, and asked for an iron, and they said they didn't have one, but you could pay for a laundry. Yeah, exactly. So I was just like, oh, that's so irritating when they try to upsell on things that should, I think, just be provided. And then secondly, when I argued against that, they said, oh, well, what you could do is you could just put your shirt in the shower and turn it on full heat, and then 10 minutes later the creases will iron out. Actually, it worked. I was quite astounded by it. But by doing that, what it did is it set off this alarm in the whole building, because I know. And then what really irritated me was that I got out. Well, it wasn't in the shower, but I got the shirt out and then placed it down, and it was next to a sign that was raving about how sustainable the hotel is. And I just think, God, it's so
Yeah.
dots just were not joined in that moment, and it was then so frustrating because when you know what the solution is but you can't go too hard in it. I wasn't reviewing the hotel, but I didn't want to come across as this arrogant, egotistical person who knows how to run this hotel for them, because I obviously don't. But yeah, that really irritates me when I mean, that is greenwashing, isn't it, really? But it irritates me when it's not a seamless experience. And actually, I kind of want to extend on that as well, because greenwashing is a tricky one, because it has allowed us to really put emphasis on sustainability. But I personally believe that any hotel group that's going to stand up there and say they're sustainable, they're lying, because how can you be when you've got X amount of hotels that are going to open over the next few years? But I don't think the emphasis should be always on that. I think it should be on how, through thinking more sustainably and thinking more locally, how you've allowed the experience to sink deeper in the consumer's minds. And actually, that's really where the value is, in my eyes, of becoming more sustainable in your practice and becoming more eco-friendly and conscious when it comes to design as well. It really isn't about saving the planet, and I hate that. But we are a capitalist industry. We're a business, obviously. And I think, actually, the sooner we realise that, and that doesn't suggest at all that we can't do things to do better or to do our best, but everything I see in like any material that's generated from any group, it's like, it's bigger, it's better, we've got more hotels opening than ever before. Well, bricks and mortar, that's not sustainable. So why are we saying that's sustainable when it's not?
So this is a really interesting...
So much to unpack there, sorry.
There is. I think it is fascinating. And so I'll just draw on one brief experience that kind of aligns with your experience. Too often I will see that little sort of almost tent card in the bathroom saying, we're a sustainable business, we're doing our bit. If you don't need your towel, then, if you can reuse it. But it's next to, half a dozen little plastic bottles that are obviously single use. So that I think is a good example of that kind of playing lip service, that greenwashing of, it's a gesture, it's an afterthought of,
I got in trouble by a hotel group for basically outing them on that. There was, I'm not going to name it because that's just not fair, but there was this hotel group that was opening what was essentially going to be like one of the most sustainable hotels in the region it was going to be in, but this was in another hotel, but same group, and they had, as you said, all these little miniatures, but the thing that really frustrated me was that you looked in the drawer and everything was wrapped in plastic, including the mugs. The mugs were wrapped in plastic, and I just had to ask because I was reviewing it. So I asked the general manager, and then we were told that, I was told that it was because consumers prefer it that way because they know it's clean. And I really just thought it was wrong. So I called it out on social media, not in such a nasty way, but just in a question as to like, really, is this where we're going? And I got an out of office call from the PR team asking me to take it down. And I said I would, but only if I could speak to a decision maker at the group so that they understood my perspective. I don't know if it changed, but for me, that felt like there was something positive coming from that.
And do you feel now that, I think rightly so, that there's a lot more focus on sustainability in the industry, as you sort of touched upon, is it still possible to find those really newsworthy, sustainable stories that that hotels can leverage through PR?
Definitely. And I think it should just be a given. I don't think necessarily the sustainability narrative should be the big like calling card. I think it should be just a given that is then included in any material. But so for example, I don't know if actually I haven't got an example top of my head, but if to have it as like the second point as opposed to just being like the most sustainable, because I think everyone, and I don't just mean journalists or editors, but everyone can read through they can read through those lines and they can understand that everyone's on that bandwagon, and actually by coming up with another narrative, but then by backing it up with evidence as to how you're sustainable or how you're, I think actually the whole the whole conversation around ESG is really hot, and I think being able to understand that to do good, it's all around social as well, is massive, and that basically means you can be more so you can be more sustainable by having a relationship with your local supplier. And the I'll be honest, when ESG first started being used, and it's a term that is environmental, social, and governance, and it was being used as opposed to sustainability, I was like, oh my God, we do not need another buzzword. I remember writing an editor's letter about it, got really angry. And then I have to really eat my words over that, because it really has allowed us to think, and not even us, I think we've been there for a while, but the consumers are now really aware of when and it's obvious in the experience of when you have collaborated locally with a supplier, versus just going off the shelf or going to the dealership to get the best deal.
I mean, I think it's such a tricky one, isn't it? I mean, we've got a client that we've been doing some extra sort of web design work to really promote their within their corporate business. They've got quite a lot of meeting spaces, and they actively plant a mangrove tree, I think somewhere in Asia, for every delegate, and it's all incorporated into the price. And like, they've gone into really intricate detail about where those trees go, and they've got obviously a provider that plants them. They're obviously not nipping over to Asia to plant them themselves, but they've got this wonderful system. And it's a really nice story, because actually, what we're finding is that those corporate bookers, especially for perhaps some of the bigger blue chip companies, they are when they are looking at booking their annual conference or the meeting rooms or whatever, there is a sustainability ESG element to their purchase. So I think and they've really invested into that concept.
It's really nice, and I love how those approaches are allowing the experiences to be elevated, and it's I like to think that it's because people want to do good as opposed to want to just be more profitable. And I think that there's so much more awareness now, and there's so much more expected, I feel, of hotels making their guests feel at home, and that comes so much deeper than just thinking about either design or hospitality. It's about merging them together. I think the real challenge lies when, and I've had it before, where someone stood up in an audience and said, look, this is amazing, you've got all these ideas, but we're not cash rich, we're asset rich. And I'm still, to this day, maybe 5 years after hearing that, I don't know what the answer is if there isn't the investment there to change. But I think there's, I don't know. That's a really tough one for me.
I think, especially at the moment where, now draw on this particular client again, it's a beautiful country house hotel, 4 Red Star property, it's lovely. But their biggest challenge is they're just really struggling to push the rate. And, they're having to push the rate in all, not obviously room rates, but also prices on everything, because all of their costs are going up. So whilst they want to be able to add, that extra 10% on for whatever it might be to, help them become more sustainable, it really comes down to whether customers are prepared to spend it. And I guess, at the top end of the market, people don't bat an eyelid at it. In the mid market, it's a bit more challenging.
And I don't mean to be a downer on the whole topic, but there's only so much that you can do if the product isn't there. And unfortunately, PR always has to sometimes be a little bit elitist, because we are looking for the best stories for the press. So we wouldn't, and it's the same with you, I'm sure, we wouldn't work with a brand that we knew we couldn't deliver that for. And that doesn't come from us, that comes from their product, them as people, what they're invested. You know what I mean? So it's a real collaboration, and it's almost like picking friends, if you know what I mean. And I don't mean that in like such a kind of surface level scenario. I mean more just like you need to really be able to work with that person and have chemistry, I guess, with that client to ensure that you do what you set out to deliver.
Yeah, I suppose ultimately, whether it's PR or marketing, our jobs are substantially harder if the product or the brand isn't strong enough. There's only so much we can do. If it's not, really exciting, that gets consumers, wanting to read more or buy into it.
Yeah. One thing I would say, I mean, I've just become a member of the NEWH, which is an association that really focuses on supporting young designers and now hospitality people in the industry and emerging in the industry. And anyone who's lost or who is lost or wants to embed themselves within the community more, I find associations like that, and there's chapters all around the world, but this is the UK chapter, such an integral part of our industry in terms of growth, because what you have these real industry big players who come stripped from their ego and really know the benefit of the association and what fuels it. And the only thing that fuels associations like that is really meaningful, honest conversations and the openness to meet new people. So I would say that our industry is really good at that. And if anyone's lost and needs solutions, that can't just come from one person or one agency or one company. It has to come from a collective of people in order for that to be there to be confident solutions in that.
I couldn't agree more, and I think it's a great concept. Hamish, I think we're coming to the end of our time together. Can I ask you to give our listeners, our hoteliers, what maybe one big thing can they do to really help PR promote their business in 2025?
That's really hard, but what I would say is just outside of work, in your own time, really list down what sets your business and your experience aside from others. And the one thing that I've always done in editorial, and I think it can be translated to hospitality, is have these blue sky thinking plans where there may not be the funds or the resources available there to do that. But if that's something that's going to help set you aside from others and help you really communicate and amplify what sets you apart and what makes you you as a brand, then you can find a way to get to those get those resources together. So yeah, I think just really understanding who you are as a business and as a brand, I think is so powerful. And that's not because of PR. That helps with sales. That helps with communication of how you market your hotel or property. And it gives you confidence as well in terms of you're doing the right thing. It's really lovely when you come up with an idea and you realize, oh my God, no one's doing that. Why are they not doing that? Why are they not doing it properly? So yeah, it can be really transformative, I feel.
Fantastic advice, Hamish. It's been an absolute pleasure, as it always is, speaking with you. Thank you so much for joining the Hotel Growth Podcast.
Thank you, Adam. It's a pleasure.